We trust world leaders, billionaire CEOs, and elite generals with the fate of humanity. But history is actually derailed by absolute morons. From an assassin who accidentally started World War I just because he stopped for a sandwich, to a blockbuster executive who literally laughed away a $50 million offer for Netflix, to a high-tech submarine captain who sank his own ship because he couldn't figure out how to flush the toilet. These are the 111 biggest idiots in modern history whose sheer arrogance cost billions of dollars, ruined empires, and changed the world forever. Hit that subscribe button because you are about to feel a whole lot better about every mistake you've ever made. 1. Imagine starting a world war because you were hungry. So in 1914, a skinny teenager named Gavrilo Princip failed his assassination mission and wandered off frustrated, believing history had moved on without him. He stopped at a small cafe in Sarajevo to buy a sandwich and rethink his life choices. At that exact moment, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand's driver took a wrong turn and stalled the royal car directly in front of him. The stunned assassin looked up from his lunch, realized destiny had literally parked in front of his table, and casually stepped outside to fire the shots that ignited World War I and reshaped the entire 20th century. 2. In 2002, scrappy entrepreneurs walked into Blockbuster headquarters offering to sell their tiny mail-order DVD company called Netflix for $50 million. CEO John Antioco reportedly laughed them out of the building. "I convinced late fees were eternal and streaming sounded ridiculous." For American viewers who remember Friday night Blockbuster runs, this was the corporate equivalent of dropping a winning lottery ticket into a shredder. Within a decade, Netflix rewrote entertainment, eliminated late fees forever, and turned Blockbuster into a nostalgic Halloween costume. Antioco did not just miss an opportunity. He accidentally handed the future of Hollywood to the guys he dismissed. 3. Picture one chemist trying to improve engines and accidentally damaging the entire planet twice. Thomas Midgley Jr. was celebrated as a genius in early 20th century America after inventing leaded gasoline to stop engine knocking, proudly demonstrating its safety by inhaling the fumes in front of reporters. Decades later, scientists realized it was quietly poisoning millions of people. If that was not enough, he also helped create CFCs, the chemicals that later punched a hole in the ozone layer. Few individuals in history can claim they altered Earth's atmosphere on a global scale, but Midgley managed to do it in two completely different ways. 4. Imagine secretly recording yourself committing a crime and thinking that is a brilliant idea. President Richard Nixon installed a voice-activated taping system in the Oval Office, believing it would protect his legacy and document history on his terms. Instead, it captured detailed evidence of obstruction of justice during the Watergate scandal. For an American audience, this was like watching someone live stream their own downfall before live streaming even existed. When investigators demanded the tapes, they revealed conversations that destroyed his presidency. Nixon did not just get caught. He personally created the audio evidence that forced him to resign. 5. Sometimes confidence meets gravity, and gravity wins immediately. Franz Reichelt, a Parisian tailor, became obsessed with inventing a wearable parachute suit and convinced officials to let him test it from the Eiffel Tower. Spectators gathered expecting a dramatic glide over the city. Instead, he ignored every warning, climbed the tower himself, and jumped. The suit failed instantly, and he plunged straight down, leaving a measurable crater in the frozen ground. Early 20th century newspapers described the stunned silence of the crowd. Reichelt believed he would revolutionize aviation. Instead, he became a cautionary tale about testing prototypes on yourself. 6. An actor once walked away from being James Bond because he thought spy movies were finished forever. George Lazenby had just starred in a major 007 film and was offered a long contract to continue the role. His agent convinced him that the swinging 60s were ending and serious cinema was the future. Lazenby listened and quit after one movie. The Bond franchise then exploded into decades of global success, turning the role into one of the most iconic in film history. For American audiences who grew up on Bond marathons, this was like voluntarily stepping off a cultural rocket ship before launch. 7. A bank robber once believed kitchen science could defeat modern surveillance. MacArthur Wheeler smeared lemon juice all over his face because he knew it could be used as invisible ink and assumed that meant security cameras would not see him. He walked into Pittsburgh banks in broad daylight, smiling confidently at the cameras. Police later aired the footage on the news, and he was arrested within hours. When shown the tape, he reportedly looked shocked, insisting he had applied the juice. Wheeler did not use a disguise or a mask. He trusted a science fair-level experiment with his freedom. 8. During World War II, one French general prepared to fight blitzkrieg tanks with bicycle messengers. Or General Maurice Gamelin refused to rely on radio communication, believing it was unreliable and old-fashioned discipline would prevail. As German forces advanced rapidly through Europe using coordinated radio tactics, French commands were still being peddled across the countryside. By the time messages arrived, the battlefield had already changed. For modern American viewers used to instant communication, this feels unreal, but it contributed to the stunning speed of France's collapse in 1940. Strategy lost to technology because leadership refused to evolve. 9. Before the Beatles became the soundtrack of a generation, one music executive confidently declared guitar groups were finished. Dick Rowe of Decca Records auditioned the band in 1962 and rejected them, insisting that their style had no future in the British or American market. While the Beatles soon signed elsewhere and went on to dominate global music, transforming pop culture in the United States and beyond. Rowe's decision became one of the most infamous missed opportunities in entertainment history. For anyone who has ever misjudged a trend, this was not a small mistake. It was turning down a cultural revolution. 10. In Soviet agriculture, one scientist convinced a dictator that genetics were fake. Trofim Lysenko rejected established science and claimed crops could be trained to behave differently if treated correctly. Joseph Stalin embraced the theory, silencing real geneticists and enforcing Lysenko's ideas across collective farms. The results were catastrophic harvest failures that worsened mass starvation. For American audiences who debate science policy today, but this story shows what happens when ideology replaces evidence on a national scale. Lysenko was not just wrong in a laboratory. His stubborn rejection of biology reshaped an entire country's food supply with deadly consequences. 11. Imagine being a sitting member of Congress and accidentally detonating your own career with one click. Anthony Weiner intended to send a private, explicit photo, but instead posted it publicly to his entire Twitter feed, instantly turning a routine evening into a national spectacle. American news networks looped the screenshot for days, while he insisted his account had been hacked. Investigations proved otherwise, resignations followed, and late-night comedians found unlimited material. In an era when politicians obsess over media control, Weiner's downfall showed how a single careless tap on a smartphone can dismantle years of political ambition in seconds. 12. Confidence is impressive until a skyscraper proves you wrong. Gary Hoy, a corporate lawyer in Toronto, loved demonstrating that his office building windows were unbreakable by repeatedly body-checking them in front of colleagues. The glass itself did not shatter, which only fueled his showmanship. One afternoon, the window frame finally gave way and the entire pane popped out, sending him falling 24 stories. Shocked coworkers watched a party trick turn into tragedy. For modern office workers who lean against glass walls without thinking, his story remains a chilling reminder that structural strength and structural attachment are not the same thing. 13. Turning down a fantasy wizard role might sound harmless until you calculate the numbers. Sean Connery was offered the part of Gandalf in a major film trilogy, along with a percentage of the box office, but he declined because he did not understand the script. The films went on to earn billions worldwide and became cultural landmarks for American and global audiences alike. Industry estimates suggested his share could have reached hundreds of millions of dollars. Connery was already a legend, yet this decision became one of Hollywood's most expensive passes, proving that sometimes not understanding the magic costs more than believing in it. 14. Stealing the world's most famous painting. Sounds brilliant until you try to sell it back to a museum. Our Vincenzo Peruggia successfully walked out of the Louvre with the Mona Lisa and hid it in his apartment for 2 years, believing he was a patriotic hero returning art to Italy. Instead of disappearing into legend, he contacted an art dealer to arrange a sale. Authorities quickly traced the plan and arrested him. For Americans who treat museum masterpieces as untouchable icons, the absurdity lies in the exit strategy. He executed the heist, but failed the common sense test that comes afterward. 15. On the morning of D-Day, the fate of Europe hung in the balance while Adolf Hitler slept. He had reportedly warned aides never to wake him without urgent cause, so when Allied forces stormed Normandy, his commanders hesitated to authorize immediate armored reinforcements. Critical hours passed before decisions were made. See, for American audiences who view D-Day as a defining military moment, the image is staggering. While thousands of soldiers fought across the beaches, the man directing the German war effort was unreachable by his own rule. History sometimes turns not on strategy, but on someone refusing to answer an early morning knock. 16. Coca-Cola is now a global empire, but its inventor did not live to see that future. John C. Pemberton created the original formula while struggling with addiction and financial pressure, eventually selling the rights for a small sum compared to what the brand would become. In the decades that followed, Coca-Cola spread across the United States and the world, shaping advertising, pop culture, and even holiday imagery. For American viewers who see the logo everywhere from diners to Super Bowl commercials, the twist is brutal. The man who mixed the syrup never tasted the fortune it generated. 17. In 1986, engineers at Chernobyl prepared for a safety test that should have been routine. Anatoly Dyatlov, the deputy chief engineer, reportedly pressured staff to proceed despite clear warnings and disabled key safety systems to keep the experiment on schedule. What followed was a catastrophic explosion that released massive radiation across Europe. For Americans who grew up hearing about the Cold War and nuclear fears, the disaster symbolizes how arrogance inside a control room can echo across continents. It was not an alien invasion or a natural disaster. It was a preventable chain of human decisions under fluorescent lights. 18. Calling a national referendum to quiet political critics might sound clever until the result changes your country forever. David Cameron authorized a vote on Britain's membership in the European Union, confident the status quo would win comfortably. Instead, the referendum passed narrowly in favor of leaving, sending shockwaves through global markets and politics. For American audiences who follow international alliances closely, the lesson feels familiar. A tactical political gamble meant to settle party disputes triggered years of economic uncertainty and diplomatic upheaval. Cameron resigned soon after, becoming a leader remembered less for stability and more for a miscalculation. 19. Living among wild grizzly bears sounds spiritual until nature ends the illusion. Now, Timothy Treadwell spent years in Alaska filming himself interacting closely with massive predators, insisting he shared a special bond that transcended biology. Experts warned that wild bears are not pets, and instincts do not negotiate. Eventually, one of the animals attacked and killed him and his companion. For American viewers fascinated by wilderness documentaries, the tragedy underscores a simple truth. Admiring nature is not the same as mastering it. Treadwell believed love rewrote the food chain, but the food chain never agreed to that contract. 20. When a superhero film required expensive digital surgery, the problem began with a mustache. Warner Bros. Executive Kevin Tsujihara insisted on a strict release date for Justice League, even though actor Henry Cavill was contractually obligated to keep facial hair for another production. The studio spent millions using computer graphics to erase the mustache frame by frame, producing results audiences instantly noticed. For American moviegoers who expect seamless blockbusters, the saga became internet comedy gold. A scheduling decision turned into a $25 million cosmetic fix, proving that sometimes the smallest detail grows into the biggest headline. 21. A man once committed the perfect crime and then ruined it by writing a novel about himself. Christian Bala, a Polish author, was linked to a cold case murder after detectives noticed his fictional book described details that had never been released publicly. Investigators traced financial records and communication patterns, slowly connecting art to reality. For American true crime fans who binge documentaries about criminals getting sloppy, this case feels unbelievable. Bala might have walked free indefinitely, but ego pushed him to turn his secret into literature. Instead of hiding evidence, he published it, binding his own confession between glossy covers. 22. France once spent billions building what it believed was an impenetrable wall. André Maginot championed a massive defensive fortification along the German border after World War I, promising it would prevent future invasions. Concrete bunkers, artillery posts, and underground rail lines stretched for miles. In 1940, German forces simply bypassed the structure by advancing through Belgium and the Ardennes forest, rendering the fortress largely irrelevant. For American viewers familiar with debates about border security, the irony is sharp. The wall was not breached dramatically, it was strategically ignored, proving that static defenses cannot outthink mobile strategy. 23. Turning down $44 billion sounds bold until your company collapses. Jerry Yang, co-founder and CEO of Yahoo, rejected a massive buyout offer from Microsoft, convinced the company's future value would exceed the proposal. Instead, Yahoo struggled to compete in the rapidly evolving tech landscape as Google and other platforms surged ahead. Years later, the brand sold for a fraction of that original offer. For American tech watchers who remember early internet days, this decision became legendary. Yang did not just gamble on growth, and he declined generational wealth and watched the digital tide move past him. 24. In the 1970s, the Ford Pinto became infamous not for speed, but for fire. Lee Iacocca pushed to rush the compact car into production to compete with foreign automakers, emphasizing tight deadlines and low costs. Internal memos later revealed cost-benefit analyses comparing the price of reinforcing the fuel tank against potential legal payouts for burn victims. When rear-end collisions caused deadly explosions, public outrage erupted. For American drivers who trust crash testing and safety regulations today, the story is chilling. Corporate math once calculated human lives against $11 design changes and chose savings over safety. 25. A presidential hopeful once challenged reporters to follow him anywhere to prove his innocence. Gary Hart, confident that rumors of an affair were baseless, practically invited the press to monitor his movements. Journalists took him up on the offer and soon captured photographs confirming the scandal. His campaign unraveled almost overnight. For American audiences who view modern political vetting as intense, Hart's moment marks a turning point in media scrutiny. It was not investigative genius that exposed him, it was his own dare. He underestimated both the press and the consequences of tempting fate. 26. When Mount St. Helens rumbled in 1980, most residents evacuated quickly. Harry R. Truman, a lodge owner near Spirit Lake, refused to leave despite repeated warnings from authorities. He insisted the mountain was part of his life and would not harm him. On May 18th, the volcano erupted catastrophically, unleashing ash and debris across Washington state. Truman was never found. For Americans who remember images of the ash cloud towering into the sky, his story stands out. It was not ignorance of danger but stubborn pride that kept him rooted in place as nature rewrote the landscape. 27. Television once promised a treasure that did not exist. Geraldo Rivera hosted a highly publicized live special to open what was rumored to be Al Capone's secret vault. Millions of viewers tuned in expecting gold, mob secrets, or hidden evidence from Chicago's criminal past. After dramatic buildup and commercial breaks, the vault revealed little more than dirt and debris. For American audiences raised on sensational media moments, the anticlimax became legendary. Rivera apologized on air, but the spectacle endured as a reminder that hype can be louder than history, and sometimes the biggest reveal is absolutely nothing. 28. John Voidowich attempted a dramatic New York bank robbery to fund his partner's surgery, but his plan unraveled almost immediately. He left the getaway car parked conspicuously outside with the engine running, drawing attention before negotiations even began. Police surrounded the bank, television cameras arrived, and the standoff turned into national news. The chaotic event later inspired a major Hollywood film. For American viewers fascinated by true crime-turned cinema, the absurdity lies in the basics. A plan bold enough for a screenplay collapsed because of something as simple as leaving the engine idling. 29. Admiral Zinovy Rozhestvensky, led a Russian fleet on an 18,000-mile journey during the Russo-Japanese War, hoping to challenge Japan's navy. Along the way, his nervous sailors mistakenly fired on British fishing boats, nearly sparking another international crisis. By the time the exhausted fleet reached East Asia, Japanese forces decisively destroyed it in the Battle of Tsushima. For American history buffs, who admire decisive naval strategy, the saga reads like a slow-motion disaster. Months of travel, diplomatic embarrassment, and logistical strain ended in overwhelming defeat within hours of contact. 30. Kodak once invented the future and then buried it. Engineers at the company developed one of the first digital cameras, presenting it internally as a breakthrough that could transform photography. Leadership hesitated, fearing digital technology would cannibalize profitable film sales. The innovation remained sidelined while competitors advanced. For Americans who grew up with yellow Kodak film boxes and later switched to smartphones, the irony is sharp. The company that captured memories for generations hesitated to reinvent itself, allowing others to dominate the digital era it helped pioneer. Sometimes protecting the present quietly sacrifices the future. 31. In 1981, two suspended walkways inside Kansas City's Hyatt Regency Hotel looked elegant and modern, packed with guests attending a dance below. Engineer Jack D. Gillum had approved a late design change over the phone that doubled the load on critical connection points. When the crowd gathered, the bolts failed, and the walkways collapsed onto the people beneath them, killing 114 and injuring hundreds. For American viewers who trust building codes and inspections, the horror lies in how ordinary the decision seemed at the time. A quick approval, meant to save time, quietly rewrote engineering textbooks forever. 32. A vice president once corrected a child's spelling and accidentally misspelled the correction. Our Dan Quayle visited an elementary school spelling bee and advised a student to add an extra letter to the word potato, turning a simple classroom moment into a national punchline. Cameras captured the exchange and late-night television replayed it endlessly. For Americans who expect leaders to appear polished in even the smallest settings, the incident became symbolic of broader doubts about competence. It was not a policy debate or diplomatic crisis. It was a single letter that followed him for the rest of his career. 33. In 1859, a British settler in Australia released 24 rabbits for sport, imagining pleasant weekend hunts on his estate. Thomas Austin did not foresee that the animals would multiply explosively in a land with few predators. Within decades, millions of rabbits devastated crops and native ecosystems, forcing massive fencing projects and biological controls. For American audiences familiar with invasive species problems, the scale feels unbelievable. One casual decision for recreation triggered an ecological crisis that reshaped an entire continent's agriculture. It was not a grand experiment. It was boredom meeting biology. 34. At the 2017 Academy Awards, the wrong envelope created one of television's most awkward live moments. Accountant Brian Cullinan mistakenly handed presenters the duplicate card for Best Actress instead of Best Picture. La La Land's team began acceptance speeches before producers rushed the stage to announce Moonlight as the real winner. Social media erupted within seconds. For American viewers who treat the Oscars like a cultural Super Bowl, the confusion felt surreal. Years of filmmaking collided with a simple backstage mix-up, proving that even the most choreographed spectacle can unravel because someone grabbed the wrong envelope. 35. A bank robber once called ahead to reserve the cash. Albert Bailey phoned a bank before his planned heist, asking staff to have money ready so he would not need to wait in line. Employees alerted police immediately, who arrived before Bailey did. When he showed up expecting efficient service, officers were waiting. For American audiences used to hearing about elaborate getaway plans, this attempt feels almost polite. Instead of disguises and escape routes, he relied on customer service logic. The result was less Ocean's 11 and more customer complaint desk ending in handcuffs. 36. Say Benito Mussolini sought to prove Italy's strength by invading Greece in 1940 without adequate preparation or winter equipment. Expecting a swift victory, his forces instead faced fierce resistance and harsh terrain that stalled their advance. Germany eventually intervened to rescue the faltering campaign, diverting resources and delaying broader strategic plans. For American history enthusiasts studying World War II, the episode highlights how ego can distort military judgment. Mussolini aimed to showcase dominance, but instead exposed weakness, forcing allies to compensate for his miscalculation at a critical moment in the conflict. 37. Sears once dominated American retail, with catalogs reaching nearly every household, yet leadership hesitated when the internet began reshaping commerce. CEO Arthur Martinez focused on traditional department store strategies, while online competitors like Amazon scaled rapidly. As consumer habits shifted toward digital shopping, Sears struggled to adapt and gradually lost relevance. For Americans who remember flipping through thick holiday catalogs, the decline feels almost nostalgic and tragic. The company that mastered mail-order commerce underestimated electronic commerce, allowing a new generation of retailers to redefine convenience while Sears faded from the mall. 38. On a freezing January morning in 1986, engineers warned that the Challenger shuttle's O-rings might fail in cold temperatures. NASA manager Lawrence Malloy reportedly pressed forward despite concerns, emphasizing schedule commitments and public expectations. 73 seconds after launch, the shuttle disintegrated, killing all 7 crew members. For American audiences who watched the launch live, including schoolchildren, the disaster became a defining national memory. It was not a hidden malfunction discovered later. Warnings had been voiced. The tragedy underscores how institutional pressure and optimism can override caution with irreversible consequences. 39. During a 2008 interview, vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin was asked which newspapers she regularly read to stay informed. She struggled to name specific publications, offering vague answers that quickly circulated online. For American voters accustomed to candidates showcasing policy depth and media awareness, the exchange fueled questions about preparedness. See, the clip replayed repeatedly across cable networks and emerging social platforms. In modern politics, perception often shapes momentum, and this brief moment became emblematic of broader debates about experience, credibility, and the demands placed on national leaders in an increasingly scrutinized media environment. 40. An elderly amateur artist in Spain attempted to restore a fading church fresco of Jesus without professional training. Cecilia Gimenez believed she was preserving a beloved image, but her repainting transformed the face into a distorted, cartoonish figure that drew global attention. Photographs spread rapidly online, turning the small town into an unexpected tourist destination. For American viewers accustomed to viral before and after images, the incident became both comedy and caution. Now, what began as a well-meaning act of devotion evolved into a lesson about expertise, unintended consequences, and the internet's appetite for the absurd. 41. At the height of a global pandemic, when millions were locked inside small apartments, actress Gal Gadot rallied celebrities to sing Imagine from their mansions as a gesture of solidarity. The video featured wealthy stars softly harmonizing from pristine kitchens and oceanfront balconies while everyday people worried about jobs and rent. Instead of comfort, it sparked widespread online backlash. For American audiences already anxious and exhausted, the performance felt disconnected from reality. What was meant to inspire unity became a case study in tone-deaf messaging, proving that sometimes good intentions collapse under the weight of timing and optics. 42. A drug trafficker once used the United States government as his personal business strategy. Paul Lear Alexander operated as a cocaine smuggler while simultaneously serving as a DEA informant, feeding authorities information about rivals to eliminate competition. By helping arrest other traffickers, he quietly expanded his own operations. For American viewers fascinated by undercover operations and double agents, the irony is striking. The system designed to dismantle cartels was manipulated to strengthen one. His story blurs the line between criminal mastermind and institutional oversight failure, revealing how incentives can twist even enforcement into opportunity. 43. Australia once declared war on emus and lost. In the early 1930s, farmers requested military assistance against large flocks of emus destroying crops. Sir George Pierce authorized soldiers armed with machine guns to control the birds. The emus scattered unpredictably, equipment malfunctioned, and the campaign became an embarrassment. Newspapers mocked the effort as soldiers struggled against fast-moving wildlife. For American audiences who enjoy bizarre government overreactions, the episode feels like satire. A modern army deployed heavy weapons against birds and achieved little measurable success, proving that firepower does not guarantee victory against nature. 44. A jewelry executive once joked that his own products were total junk during a speech. Gerald Ratner believed self-deprecating humor would charm investors, but the remark devastated public confidence in his brand. Sales plummeted almost overnight and the company's market value dropped dramatically. For American consumers who rely on perception and branding, the lesson is blunt. Retail thrives on trust, and a single careless sentence can undermine years of marketing. Ratner did not face a scandal uncovered by journalists. He personally supplied the soundbite that erased millions in value. 45. Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, a carbon fiber submersible descended toward the Titanic wreck with paying passengers inside. OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush dismissed established deep-sea engineering standards, favoring experimental materials and simplified controls. Industry experts had warned about structural integrity at extreme pressures. The vessel later imploded during a dive, drawing global attention to the risks of ignoring safety consensus. For American viewers drawn to exploration and innovation, the tragedy underscores a harsh reality. Pioneering ambition must respect physics. In the deep ocean, there are no margins for error and no second chances. 46. Idi Amin once declared war on the United States and claimed victory the very next day. The Ugandan dictator announced hostilities in a speech, then triumphantly stated that his country had defeated America because no response came. For American audiences accustomed to complex international conflicts, the episode sounds surreal. There were no battles, no negotiations, and no recognition from Washington. Amin manufactured a symbolic win to bolster his image domestically. It was less military strategy and more theatrical bravado, illustrating how propaganda can substitute for reality when accountability is absent. 47. A luxury cruise ship ran aground off the Italian coast after its captain steered dangerously close to shore to perform a flashy salute. Captain Francesco Schettino delayed evacuation procedures and eventually left the vessel while passengers remained aboard. The Costa Concordia disaster unfolded live across global media, showing the massive ship tilted on its side. For American travelers who board cruises expecting safety and order, the incident shattered assumptions. Leadership failed at the exact moment calm direction was needed most. The image of a captain abandoning ship became a modern maritime cautionary tale. 48. In the late 1980s, pop duo Milli Vanilli dominated charts and even won a Grammy Award. Producer Frank Farian later admitted that the performers had not sung the vocals on their own album. When the truth surfaced, awards were revoked and fans felt betrayed. For American audiences raised on music authenticity debates, the scandal exposed how image and marketing can overpower substance. The duo did not merely lip-sync on stage. They built careers on recordings that were never their voices, turning a meteoric rise into one of pop culture's most dramatic collapses. 49. For years, detailed warnings about Bernie Madoff's investment scheme reached federal regulators. SEC Chairman Christopher Cox later faced scrutiny for the agency's failure to act decisively on credible whistleblower reports outlining mathematical impossibilities in the returns. The Ponzi scheme eventually collapsed, wiping out billions in savings. For American investors who trust oversight institutions, the episode was deeply unsettling. The red flags were not hidden. They were documented repeatedly. Yet bureaucratic inertia and missed signals allowed one of the largest financial frauds in history to expand unchecked until it imploded. 50. During the Battle of Stalingrad, Hermann Göring assured Adolf Hitler that the Luftwaffe could supply trapped German troops by air. The promise proved wildly unrealistic given weather conditions, distance, and Soviet resistance. Aircraft deliveries fell far short of requirements, leaving soldiers undersupplied and eventually overwhelmed. For American history enthusiasts analyzing World War II turning points, the miscalculation stands out. Overconfidence at the highest command level translated into starvation and defeat on the ground. It was not a lack of bravery among troops. It was a guarantee made from afar that reality could not support. 51. In 1985, Coca-Cola decided the only way to stay ahead of Pepsi was to change the flavor of the most recognizable soda on Earth. CEO Roberto Goizueta approved new Coke after taste tests suggested consumers preferred a sweeter formula. The company replaced the original recipe nationwide, assuming brand loyalty would survive. Instead, Americans flooded hotlines, hoarded old bottles, and treated the switch like a cultural betrayal. Within months, Coca-Cola reintroduced the classic formula as Coca-Cola Classic. For U.S. audiences who treat certain brands like family traditions, this was not product innovation. It was a fizzy identity crisis. 52. A sleek London skyscraper nicknamed the Walkie-Talkie once started melting cars parked on the street below. Architect Raphael Vignoli designed the building with a concave glass facade that unintentionally concentrated sunlight into intense heat beams. On bright days, the reflected light grew hot enough to blister paint and warp metal. For Americans used to hearing about cutting-edge architecture, the idea of a building functioning like a giant magnifying glass sounds absurd. Engineers eventually installed shading to fix the issue, but not before the structure earned a reputation for roasting vehicles like an urban science experiment. 53. Jean Bédel Bokassa ruled one of the world's poorest nations, yet crowned himself emperor in a lavish ceremony modeled after Napoleon. He reportedly spent an enormous portion of the national budget on gold-trimmed uniforms, imported horses, and elaborate feasts while citizens struggled economically. For American viewers accustomed to scrutinizing government spending, the extravagance feels almost theatrical. The self-coronation did not stabilize his rule. It intensified criticism and highlighted the gap between leadership spectacle and everyday reality. Bokassa sought grandeur and legacy, but the opulence mainly amplified perceptions of detachment and excess. 54. In 1919, a massive steel tank filled with molasses burst in Boston, unleashing a sticky tidal wave through city streets. Arthur Gell, involved in oversight of the storage facility, had bypassed thorough safety testing to cut costs. When the tank failed, a surge of thick syrup moved faster than many could escape, damaging buildings and claiming lives. For American audiences who think of molasses as harmless baking syrup, the image is surreal. Seeing the disaster was not triggered by sabotage or natural disaster. It stemmed from structural shortcuts that turned an ordinary industrial container into a deadly flood. 55. Rapper Ja Rule enthusiastically promoted Fire Festival as a luxury music paradise in the Bahamas, showcasing models, yachts, and promises of gourmet food. Attendees arrived to find disaster relief tents and sparse supplies instead of villas and performances. As chaos unfolded on social media, Ja Rule distanced himself from operational responsibility. For American millennials who watched the fiasco in real time online, the collapse became a symbol of influencer culture gone wrong. Marketing hype traveled faster than logistics, and credibility evaporated just as quickly when reality failed to match curated images. 56. A James Howells accidentally discarded a hard drive containing thousands of early Bitcoin, later realizing its value had skyrocketed into hundreds of millions of dollars. The device ended up buried in a municipal landfill, prompting years of petitions to excavate the site. Local authorities denied requests due to environmental and safety concerns. For American audiences fascinated by cryptocurrency booms and busts, the story feels like modern treasure folklore. Unlike pirate gold at sea, this fortune sits beneath layers of trash. A simple household mistake transformed into one of the most expensive, accidental cleanups never approved. 57. Pilot Douglas Corrigan filed a flight plan from New York to California but landed in Ireland instead. In 1938, he claimed his compass malfunctioned and that he simply miscalculated direction during the 28-hour journey. Authorities suspended his license, yet the public embraced him as Wrong Way Corrigan, turning the incident into a media sensation. For Americans who admire daring aviators, the episode straddles accident and stunt. Whether genuine error or subtle rebellion against denied permissions, the cross-Atlantic detour showcased how a single navigation decision can rewrite a routine flight into legend. 58. Elizabeth Holmes convinced investors that her company Theranos had revolutionized blood testing with tiny sample sizes and proprietary machines. She adopted a distinctive voice and black turtleneck image while promising technology that could diagnose numerous conditions from a finger prick. Investigations later revealed that standard commercial analyzers were performing many tests, and that results were unreliable. For American audiences captivated by Silicon Valley innovation stories, the downfall was dramatic. Billions in valuation evaporated as scrutiny replaced charisma. Holmes had built a narrative of disruption that could not withstand scientific verification. 59. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge opened in 1940 with elegant lines and a lightweight design intended to save costs. Engineer Leon Moissafe had embraced new aerodynamic theories, but the structure soon began swaying dramatically in moderate winds. Residents nicknamed it Galloping Gertie as oscillations grew more extreme. Months after opening, the bridge twisted violently and collapsed into the water below. For Americans accustomed to trusting large infrastructure, the footage remains striking. The failure was not caused by sabotage or heavy traffic. It was physics exposing flaws in assumptions about wind and resonance. 60. Mao Zedong launched the Four Pests campaign, urging citizens to eliminate sparrows along with rats and insects. Massive drives encouraged people to bang pots and destroy nests so birds could not land and would die from exhaustion. The effort succeeded in reducing sparrow populations but ignored their role in eating crop-damaging insects. Locust numbers surged, contributing to agricultural collapse and famine. For American viewers who debate environmental balance and unintended consequences, the episode illustrates ecological complexity. Removing one species to solve a problem can unleash another, often with far greater impact than anticipated. 61. In 1982, a California truck driver decided lawn furniture could double as aviation technology. Larry Walters tied 45 helium weather balloons to his backyard lawn chair, packed a BB gun to pop them later, and lifted off expecting a gentle glide. Instead, he shot up to around 16,000 feet, drifting into controlled airspace near Los Angeles International Airport. Airline pilots reported a man floating by in a chair. For American audiences raised on suburban cautionary tales, the image is unforgettable. Walters eventually descended safely, but not before proving that curiosity plus hardware store supplies can briefly challenge federal aviation rules. 62. After years of building one of television's most beloved fantasy series, ICE showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss rushed the final season of Game of Thrones to move on to other projects. Plot lines that had simmered for nearly a decade wrapped up at lightning speed, leaving fans confused and frustrated. In one infamous scene, a modern coffee cup was left visible on a medieval table, symbolizing the perceived carelessness. For American viewers who invested years in the story, the backlash was immediate and loud. Cultural dominance evaporated almost overnight, replaced by memes and disappointment. 63. In 1980, billionaire Nelson Bunker Hunt attempted to corner the global silver market by buying massive quantities of the metal, driving prices to historic highs. His strategy relied heavily on borrowed money and complex futures contracts. When regulators changed trading rules and prices collapsed, his empire unraveled rapidly. For American investors who study market bubbles, the episode remains a textbook case of leverage magnifying risk. Hunt did not simply lose a bet. He helped inflate a speculative frenzy that burst spectacularly, demonstrating how attempts to control an entire commodity can backfire when liquidity disappears. 64. Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990, assuming international response would be limited and manageable. Instead, a broad coalition led by the United States assembled rapidly, launching Operation Desert Storm to expel Iraqi forces. Within weeks, his military faced overwhelming air and ground assaults. For American audiences who remember nightly news footage of precision strikes and briefings from the Pentagon, the invasion marked a defining moment of post-Cold War geopolitics. Hussein misjudged global reaction and military balance, transforming a regional land grab into a confrontation that reshaped Middle Eastern politics for decades. 65. Adam Neumann convinced investors that WeWork was not just renting office space, but reinventing human consciousness through community. Backed by billions in venture capital, the company expanded rapidly with ambitious valuations. When plans for a public offering revealed financial losses and unusual governance structures, confidence collapsed. The valuation plunged dramatically, and Neumann departed with a controversial exit package. For American audiences fascinated by startup culture, the saga illustrated how storytelling can inflate expectations beyond fundamentals. Why a real estate business dressed in tech language attracted extraordinary investment until transparency forced a reckoning. 66. In the late 19th century, Ferdinand de Lesseps, celebrated for the Suez Canal, attempted to build the Panama Canal at sea level through dense jungle and mountainous terrain. He underestimated engineering challenges and the impact of tropical diseases like malaria and yellow fever. Thousands of workers died, and the project went bankrupt. For American viewers familiar with the eventual U.S. completion of the canal, the earlier failure highlights the cost of optimism without preparation. Reputation from one triumph did not guarantee success in a radically different environment. 67. Nicolae Ceausescu organized a massive televised rally in Romania in 1989 to display public loyalty. The crowds filled the square as cameras broadcast live nationwide. Mid-speech murmurs turned into boos, confusion spread, and the leader appeared visibly stunned on camera. Within days, the regime collapsed, and he was arrested. For American audiences accustomed to tightly controlled political events, the raw footage remains striking. A moment intended to reinforce authority instead revealed its fragility, showing how quickly public sentiment can shift when fear recedes and dissent becomes audible. 68. In 1896, railroad promoter William George Crush staged a publicity stunt in Texas by intentionally crashing two locomotives head-on before a crowd of spectators. He expected dramatic but controlled destruction to sell train tickets. Instead, the boilers exploded, sending metal fragments into the audience and causing fatalities. For Americans who attend large-scale events assuming safety planning, the disaster underscores how spectacle can override caution. Crush sought headlines, and certainly received them, but the tragedy demonstrated that engineering forces do not respect promotional enthusiasm. 69. Director Tom Hooper adapted the musical Cats into a major film using digital fur technology to blend human actors with feline features. The result produced uncanny visuals that unsettled many viewers and critics. Scenes meant to be whimsical often drew laughter for unintended reasons. For American moviegoers accustomed to polished blockbusters, the film's reception became a cultural moment. Instead of reviving a beloved stage show, the experiment highlighted how ambitious visual effects can misfire when aesthetic choices clash with audience expectations. On 70. Nick Leeson, a young trader at Barings Bank, accumulated massive unauthorized losses through risky derivatives bets while also supervising the department meant to monitor his trades. He hid the growing deficit in an error account, hoping to recover through further speculation. When markets moved against him, the losses ballooned beyond control, and the centuries-old bank collapsed. For American finance watchers who track corporate governance, the episode illustrates the danger of weak oversight. One individual's unchecked risk-taking erased an institution that had financed governments and wars. 71. In 1982, Argentine leader Leopoldo Galtieri ordered the invasion of the Falkland Islands, calculating that Britain would not commit to a costly war over distant territory. While instead, the United Kingdom launched a full military response, deploying naval forces across the Atlantic. The conflict ended with Argentine defeat and domestic unrest that weakened his rule. For American viewers who study geopolitical gambles, the misjudgment stands out. A move intended to boost nationalist pride and consolidate power triggered international confrontation and accelerated political collapse at home. 72. Billy McFarland marketed Fire Festival as an ultra-luxury music experience featuring private villas, celebrity chefs, and exclusive performances. thousands of attendees paid premium prices and flew to the Bahamas expecting paradise. They arrived to find disaster relief tents, limited food, and chaotic logistics. Social media posts spread images of cheese sandwiches and soaked luggage within hours. While for American audiences immersed in influencer culture, the fiasco became a cautionary tale about hype, overpowering infrastructure. Branding and glossy promos could not substitute for plumbing, planning, and basic operational competence. 73. NASA's Mars Climate Orbiter launched in 1998 as part of an ambitious exploration program, but a subtle mismatch undermined the mission. One engineering team used metric units while another relied on imperial measurements, creating calculation errors in navigation. The spacecraft entered Mars's atmosphere at the wrong altitude and was lost. For Americans who take pride in space achievements, the incident highlighted how small inconsistencies can have enormous consequences. It was not a dramatic explosion or sabotage. It was a unit conversion oversight that turned a multi-million-dollar mission into debris. 74. Saparmurat Niyazov, leader of Turkmenistan, reshaped public life according to personal preference. He renamed months of the year after himself and family members, banned lip-syncing at concerts, and imposed unusual cultural decrees. Portraits and statues reinforced his cultivated image across the country. For American audiences accustomed to checks and balances limiting executive power, the breadth of these changes feels surreal. Policy decisions extended beyond economics or defense into calendars and daily habits, illustrating how concentrated authority can transform even mundane aspects of civic life. 75. At the 1904 Olympic Marathon in St. Louis, organizer James Sullivan withheld water stations along the course to study the effects of deliberate dehydration. Runners competed on dusty roads in high heat with minimal hydration and inconsistent medical oversight. Several athletes collapsed, one was revived with stimulants, and the event became infamous. For American sports fans who expect regulated safety standards today, the experiment reads like an endurance trial rather than a race. Competitive ambition intersected with questionable scientific curiosity, producing one of the strangest chapters in Olympic history. 76. In 1938, Orson Welles broadcast a radio adaptation of The War of the Worlds, formatted as realistic news bulletins. Some listeners tuned in late and mistook the fictional Martian invasion for genuine reporting. A panic spread in certain areas as people contacted authorities seeking confirmation. For American audiences living through an era when radio was a primary information source, the program demonstrated the persuasive power of media framing. The broadcast did not fabricate news with malicious intent, but its style blurred entertainment and reality enough to create widespread alarm. 77. Enron CEO Jeffrey Skilling championed complex mark-to-market accounting practices that allowed the company to record projected future profits immediately. As energy markets shifted and debt mounted, the financial statements masked growing instability. When investigations uncovered widespread fraud, Enron collapsed, wiping out jobs and retirement savings. For American investors who rely on transparent reporting, the scandal became a watershed moment. Innovative language about market efficiency could not conceal structural weaknesses indefinitely. Accounting creativity eventually collided with regulatory scrutiny and market reality. 78. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy approved the Bay of Pigs invasion, relying on intelligence that Cuban resistance would rise against Fidel Castro. The operation faltered quickly, as expected. Support failed to materialize, and Cuban forces captured many of the invaders. The episode embarrassed the young administration and intensified Cold War tensions. For American viewers examining presidential decision-making, the invasion illustrates how incomplete information and optimistic assumptions can shape high-stakes outcomes. Strategic intentions were overshadowed by operational miscalculations and flawed expectations. 79. Doug Evans introduced Juicero, a sleek countertop device priced at hundreds of dollars that squeezed proprietary juice packets. The company attracted significant venture capital funding and positioned itself as a high-tech wellness breakthrough. Journalists later demonstrated that the packets could be squeezed by hand with similar results, undermining the product's core value proposition. For American consumers familiar with gadget culture, the revelation sparked widespread ridicule. Technology branding alone could not justify a premium price, when the underlying function required little more than basic grip strength. 80. In 1980, an Air Force technician named David Powell dropped a heavy socket wrench into a Titan II missile silo in Arkansas. The tool punctured the missile's fuel tank, leading to a massive explosion hours later that destroyed the complex and caused casualties. For Americans who lived through Cold War anxieties about nuclear weapons, the incident underscores how routine maintenance errors can escalate dramatically. The explosion was not triggered by enemy action, but by an accident during servicing, highlighting the razor-thin margin for error surrounding strategic arsenals. 81. In Turkmenistan, a gleaming 19-foot golden statue of a dog was unveiled in the capital, commissioned by President Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedow to honor his favorite national breed. The monument featured dramatic lighting and a rotating pedestal, elevating a pet into political symbolism. For American viewers accustomed to campaign donors and presidential libraries, dedicating vast public funds to a monumental canine feels surreal. The statue did not address economic reform or infrastructure. It reinforced personal image. In a country facing practical challenges, leadership chose spectacle in bronze and gold, proving that ego sometimes receives the largest budget allocation. 82. During World War II, a German submarine known as U-1206 featured an advanced high-pressure toilet system requiring precise operation. Captain Karl Adolf Schlitt reportedly attempted to use it without proper procedure, allowing seawater to flood critical compartments. The malfunction forced the submarine to surface, where it was detected and attacked, leading to its loss. For American audiences fascinated by wartime engineering, the story highlights how even sophisticated technology can be undermined by small operational errors. In a vessel designed for stealth and survival, plumbing proved as dangerous as enemy fire. 83. As the 2008 financial crisis unfolded, Lehman Brothers CEO Dick Fuld maintained aggressive exposure to subprime mortgage assets, confident markets would rebound. Instead, housing prices continued falling and liquidity evaporated. Without sufficient support, the 158-year-old investment bank filed for bankruptcy, triggering shockwaves through global finance. For American viewers who watched retirement accounts shrink and headlines flash red, Lehman's collapse symbolized systemic fragility. Leadership doubled down on risk at the edge of a cliff, underestimating how quickly confidence could disappear once trust in complex financial instruments dissolved. 84. Robert McNamara, serving as U.S. Secretary of Defense, launched Project 100,000 during the Vietnam War to expand troop numbers by lowering recruitment standards. The initiative brought in men who previously would have been deemed unfit for service, often placing them in demanding combat roles. Casualty rates among these recruits were disproportionately high. For American audiences reflecting on Vietnam-era policy decisions, the program remains controversial. Efforts to meet manpower targets intersected with ethical concerns about preparedness and fairness, raising questions about how institutions balance strategic objectives against individual welfare. 85. In 2000, media conglomerate Time Warner merged with AOL in a deal valued at around $165 billion, championed by executive Gerald Levin as a transformative union of traditional and digital media. Shortly after, the dot-com bubble burst, advertising revenue plunged, and the combined company wrote down enormous losses. For American investors who experienced the volatility of early internet markets, the merger became shorthand for overvaluation and misplaced optimism. Promises of synergy and technological revolution could not withstand market correction, turning a celebrated announcement into one of corporate history's most expensive miscalculations. 86. Psychologist B.F. Skinner once proposed guiding missiles using live pigeons trained to peck at visual targets displayed inside the nose cone, while the birds pecking would adjust flight controls toward enemy objectives. Although preliminary tests showed surprising accuracy, military leaders ultimately deemed the concept impractical. For American audiences accustomed to advanced digital guidance systems, the image of birds steering weapons feels almost cartoonish. Yet the project reflected genuine wartime experimentation, illustrating how innovative thinking can border on the bizarre when technological solutions are still evolving. 87. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi reportedly developed an unusual fascination with U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, collecting photographs and speaking publicly about her in flattering terms. The attention became an awkward footnote in diplomatic interactions between the two nations. See, for American viewers following international politics, the episode underscored how personal fixations can intrude upon formal statecraft. High-level meetings intended to address security and policy occasionally carried undertones of eccentric admiration, blending geopolitical tension with unexpected personal theatrics. 88. During the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010, BP CEO Tony Hayward faced intense public scrutiny as crude oil poured into the Gulf of Mexico. In interviews, he expressed frustration and remarked that he wanted his life back. The comment, delivered amid environmental devastation and economic hardship for coastal communities, drew widespread criticism. For American audiences watching livelihoods threatened and ecosystems damaged, the phrasing seemed detached from the scale of suffering. So corporate leadership under crisis requires empathy and clarity, and a single poorly chosen sentence amplified perceptions of indifference. 89. In 1980, Rosie Ruiz crossed the Boston Marathon finish line, appearing surprisingly fresh and claimed victory in the women's division. Observers soon questioned her performance because she showed minimal signs of exertion and lacked consistent checkpoint sightings. Investigations revealed she had joined the course near the end rather than running the full distance. For American sports fans who revere marathon tradition and endurance, the deception felt brazen. Ruiz underestimated the scrutiny applied to major competitions, discovering that shortcuts in a 42-kilometer race are difficult to conceal. 90. In 1938, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returned from negotiations with Adolf Hitler, waiving a signed agreement and declaring peace for our time. The Munich Agreement conceded territory in hopes of avoiding broader conflict. Less than a year later, Germany invaded Poland, igniting World War II. For American audiences studying the lead-up to global war, the episode often symbolizes the limits of appeasement. Diplomatic optimism collided with expansionist ambition, demonstrating that written assurances cannot restrain leaders determined to violate them. 91. In 1985, Apple's boardroom drama reached a peak when CEO John Sculley maneuvered to remove co-founder Steve Jobs from operational control. Internal tensions over product direction and management style erupted into a power struggle that sidelined the company's visionary founder. In the years that followed, Apple struggled with inconsistent strategy and declining relevance in a rapidly evolving tech market. For American audiences who later watched Jobs return and launch products like the iMac and iPhone, the episode feels like a corporate near-death experience. The company that sparked personal computing nearly lost its creative compass through internal politics. 92. John Harvey Kellogg believed bland food could curb immoral impulses, particularly what he considered unhealthy desires. Working as a physician and health reformer, he promoted strict diets and helped develop cornflakes as part of a regimen, emphasizing simplicity and self-control. What began as a moral experiment eventually became a breakfast empire stocked on supermarket shelves across America. For U.S. audiences pouring cereal into bowls each morning, the origin story is striking. A product now associated with cartoon mascots and sugar variations started as an earnest attempt to regulate behavior through flavorless nutrition. 93. Cuban leader Fulgencio Batista fled Havana in 1959 as revolutionary forces advanced, reportedly departing with significant wealth while leaving much of his military behind. The rapid collapse of his regime cleared the path for Fidel Castro to assume power. For American audiences examining Cold War history and U.S. relations with Cuba, the episode marks a pivotal shift. Batista's departure was not a negotiated transition, but a hurried exit that reshaped Caribbean geopolitics. His final act underscored how quickly authority can dissolve when public support erodes and opposition gains momentum. 94. Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg oversaw development of the 737 MAX as the company raced to compete in the commercial aviation market. A new flight control system known as MCAS was introduced with limited pilot training requirements to streamline sales. After 2 tragic crashes, investigations scrutinized design decisions, certification processes, and corporate communication. For American travelers accustomed to boarding aircraft with confidence, the revelations were unsettling. Cost pressures and competitive urgency intersected with complex engineering, demonstrating how incremental software changes in aviation can carry profound safety implications. 95. Cyclist Lance Armstrong built a legendary career around resilience and comeback narratives, winning multiple Tour de France titles after surviving cancer. For years, he denied allegations of performance-enhancing drug use and pursued legal action against critics. Eventually, investigations and testimony from former teammates revealed a sophisticated doping program. Titles were stripped and sponsorships ended. For American sports fans who embraced his inspirational story, the fallout was deeply disappointing. The scandal highlighted how competitive pressure and reputation management can drive elaborate deception, eroding trust not only in one athlete but in an entire sport. 96. In 1920, King Alexander of Greece was bitten by a pet monkey during a walk in royal gardens, and the wound became infected, and complications led to his death weeks later. The unexpected succession crisis destabilized the Greek government and influenced broader political developments in the region. For American audiences accustomed to dramatic shifts caused by wars or elections, the trigger here was startlingly mundane. A minor encounter with an animal altered leadership at a critical historical moment, illustrating how fragile political continuity can be when chance intervenes. 97. Ronald Wayne helped found Apple alongside Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, but soon grew concerned about personal financial liability tied to the young company's debts. He sold his 10% stake for a modest sum and departed early in its history. Decades later, Apple became one of the most valuable corporations in the world. For American entrepreneurs weighing risk and reward, Wayne's decision stands as a powerful example of caution's opportunity cost. Prudence protected him from short-term exposure, but distanced him from generational wealth that few could have imagined at the time. 98. Thomas Edison engaged in a fierce rivalry over electrical systems, promoting direct current while criticizing alternating current backed by competitors. As part of a campaign to highlight perceived dangers of AC, public demonstrations included the electrocution of animals to influence opinion. For American audiences studying the evolution of power infrastructure, the episode reveals how industrial competition can spill into public spectacle. Technological debates were not confined to laboratories. They unfolded in newspapers and staged events, blending innovation with aggressive public relations tactics. 99. William Henry Harrison delivered the longest inaugural address in U.S. history on a cold March day in 1841, declining to wear a coat or hat despite harsh weather. Weeks later, he developed illness and died only 32 days into his presidency, the shortest term on record. For American viewers who treat inaugurations as symbolic displays of strength and continuity, the episode underscores how symbolism can overshadow practicality. A desire to project endurance intersected with environmental reality, abruptly ending a presidency before its agenda truly began. 100. In 1987, a 19-year-old amateur pilot named Matthias Rust flew a small Cessna from Finland into Soviet airspace, navigating through defense systems and landing near Red Square in Moscow. The breach embarrassed Soviet authorities and led to internal military shakeups. For American audiences following Cold War tensions, the stunt highlighted vulnerabilities within a superpower's security apparatus. It was not a stealth bomber or coordinated assault. A civilian aircraft slipped through layers of radar and command structures, revealing gaps that sophisticated adversaries might have exploited. 101. Actor Jussie Smollett reported being the victim of a violent hate crime in Chicago, describing an attack that quickly drew national sympathy and media coverage. Investigators later uncovered evidence that the incident had been staged, including payments made to acquaintances involved in the plan. For American audiences accustomed to intense public debates over social justice and media narratives, the reversal was jarring. Support transformed into skepticism as court proceedings unfolded. The episode demonstrated how quickly public opinion can shift when claims collapse under scrutiny, and how exploiting serious issues for personal gain can damage broader trust. 102. Adam Osborne launched one of the first portable computers and generated strong early sales, positioning his company as an innovator in personal technology. Eager to stay ahead, he publicly announced a superior upcoming model long before it was ready for release. Customers stopped buying the existing product, waiting for the promised upgrade. Cash flow evaporated, and the company soon declared bankruptcy. For American entrepreneurs navigating product cycles, the cautionary term Osborne effect became shorthand for premature hype, or ambition to showcase the future ended up erasing the present. 103. Crypto entrepreneur Sina Estavi purchased a non-fungible token representing Jack Dorsey's first tweet for $2.9 million during a digital asset boom. The acquisition symbolized peak enthusiasm around blockchain collectibles. Years later, when he attempted to resell it, bids reportedly came in at a tiny fraction of the purchase price. For American investors tracking speculative waves, the story encapsulates volatility in emerging markets. Ownership of a digital certificate tied to internet history did not guarantee sustained demand. Market sentiment shifted, leaving a headline-grabbing purchase struggling to find a buyer. 104. Stationery brand Bic introduced a line of pens marketed specifically for women, featuring pastel colors and slightly altered designs. The product implied that standard pens were somehow unsuitable, prompting widespread online mockery and critical reviews. For American consumers attuned to branding missteps, the launch became a viral example of unnecessary gender segmentation. The pens functioned like any other ballpoint, yet the marketing framed them as revolutionary. Social media amplified the backlash, demonstrating how quickly audiences respond when companies appear disconnected from everyday practicality. 105. During the 1990s, Beanie Babies surged in popularity, with some collectors convinced certain plush toys would fund college educations. Investor Chris Robinson reportedly spent his children's savings accumulating rare editions, anticipating skyrocketing resale values. So when the market cooled and demand plummeted, the anticipated fortune failed to materialize. For American audiences familiar with speculative crazes from trading cards to meme stocks, the episode illustrates how nostalgia and scarcity narratives can inflate expectations. Stuffed animals once treated like blue-chip assets eventually returned to being just toys. 106. MoviePass CEO Mitch Lowe introduced a subscription model allowing users to watch unlimited movies in theaters for a low monthly fee. The strategy attracted millions of customers but required the company to pay full ticket prices to cinemas each time a subscriber attended a film. Losses mounted rapidly as usage increased. For American consumers drawn to disruptive deals, the offer felt almost too good to be true. Financial sustainability lagged behind popularity, and the business collapsed under its own generosity. Innovation without viable economics proved unsustainable. 107. José María Barreda championed construction of a large airport in central Spain, intended to stimulate economic growth. Built far from major population centers, the facility struggled to attract airlines and passengers. Flights dwindled until the airport closed and was eventually sold for a fraction of its construction cost. For American viewers observing infrastructure debates, the story highlights risks of optimistic projections disconnected from demand. Concrete runways and terminals alone cannot guarantee traffic. Grand projects require realistic assessments of geography, market forces, and long-term viability. 108. A Montreal mayor, Jean Drapeau, famously asserted that the Olympics could not produce a deficit any more than a man could have a baby. The 1976 Games instead generated enormous debt that burdened the city for decades. Construction overruns and financial miscalculations transformed celebration into fiscal strain. For American audiences evaluating the costs of hosting mega events, the episode stands as a warning. Civic pride and international visibility may inspire ambitious spending, But optimistic assurances cannot override budget realities once bills come due. 109. Retail executive Ron Johnson attempted to reinvent J.C. Penney by eliminating frequent coupons and sales promotions in favor of straightforward pricing. Longtime customers who enjoyed the perceived thrill of discounts reacted negatively, and sales declined sharply. For American shoppers accustomed to strategic coupon clipping and clearance racks, the change disrupted familiar habits. Behavioral psychology often drives retail success as much as pricing structure. By removing the illusion of savings, the company underestimated how strongly customers valued the experience of getting a deal. 110. Harley-Davidson once licensed its rugged brand to a line of cologne, seeking to extend its image beyond motorcycles and apparel. The fragrance launch puzzled consumers who associated the company with engines and open highways rather than personal scents. Sales failed to ignite enthusiasm, and the product became a frequently cited branding misstep. For American audiences loyal to iconic heritage brands, the episode illustrates limits of diversification. Not expanding into unrelated categories can dilute identity when the extension feels disconnected from core values and customer expectations. 111. When the U.S. Mint introduced the Susan B. Anthony dollar coin in 1979, director Stella Hackle Sims approved a design nearly identical in size and color to the quarter. Consumers frequently confuse the two coins in transactions in vending machines. Public frustration limited circulation, and the coin was discontinued after a short run. For American audiences familiar with everyday cash handling, the failure underscores how subtle design decisions shape usability. A new denomination meant to modernize currency instead highlighted the importance of clear differentiation in something as simple as pocket change. If this list proved anything, it is that history is not just made by geniuses and heroes. Sometimes it is shaped by ego, bad math, one wrong email, one stubborn decision, or one sandwich at the worst possible moment. Empires fall, companies collapse, careers explode, and sometimes entire wars begin because someone thought they were the smartest person in the room. So here is the real question. Which one shocked you the most? And which one do you think was the absolute biggest idiot move in modern history? Drop it in the comments right now. If this blew your mind, smash that like button, subscribe to Dumb History, and share this with someone who thinks they never make mistakes. And do not click away yet. The next video on your screen proves history somehow gets even crazier.